Hey everyone, it's Jaime and Nathan. It is Friday and it is part 3 of the series for Cerebral Palsy Sunrise body image. And today's topic is the cognitive aspects of body image, meaning how you feel about the way you look and how that impacts things. So, hey Nathan, how are you?
Hey, it's a beautiful 70-degree day here in South Carolina.
Nice. So I know you and I chatted a little bit before the live regarding kind of what cognitive means, and you brought up a really great point about CP in the brain. So you maybe want to start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So how many of us can relate to having to go to physical therapy and occupational therapy when we were little, or maybe even into adulthood? But a lot of things outside of the physical body aren't really talked about. What Jamie and I were talking about was the idea that at the end of the day, we all have some form of a brain injury, but not a lot of our exercises are focused on the brain itself.
And even though by definition, if we look up like the Webster's dictionary definition of cerebral palsy, it will literally say that we have a brain injury, that it's a brain injury caused by lack of oxygen before, during, or shortly after birth. Most of us are not treated like brain injury patients, which is interesting.
Yeah. And I've got an interesting story about that in and of itself. Before I ever got a job, my neighbor didn't really understand cerebral palsy. And so she would ask why I couldn't do certain things. And then she wouldn't ask me. She would usually ask my mom during some of their conversations.
Right. Like,
one day,
yeah.
my mom was like, yeah, so, he's got a brain injury. And the neighbor was like, what? Really? And I guess it's just the fact that people have a predisposed idea of what that looks like to them. And when most people think of that, they think of somebody who unfortunately is a vegetable and can't do a whole lot. So for us, we have a lot of, even though we look, quote, weird, we look, quote, different,
right,
we still do a lot of things that people normally do, so they don't really associate it with a brain injury, and we weren't in a car accident or a motorcycle accident or anything like that. So
right. So they don't think of it that way, even though that really, I mean, that's what it is, and that's why there's no cure, right? There's no cure for brain injuries. It's not a disease. We can't go into our DNA and fix it. It's trauma, right? We've all experienced some sort of trauma that's created some sort of permanent damage. And for all of us, it's different impacted different ways on that big body line or big number line that we talked about that does impact our body image, because as a person with a brain injury, I don't think you can go anywhere in America and walk into a rehab and meet a bunch of people that are like, oh yeah, I feel great about my body. Like,
yeah,
you feel horrible about your body when you're in physical therapy, or at least I did anyway, because it's never doing anything anybody is asking you to do, and it's always a struggle. And that starts really young, because most of us start our physical therapy around the age of 2 or 18 months, right? And I think in a weird sort of way, like, we have to be really present to rewrite that, because it's impossible not to get frustrated with your body from the time you're a toddler until you're an adult, which I think kind of impacts our body image. Now, a lot of us are able to work through it, but some people never do. They hate their body and the way it works from about the time they're 2 years old until they hit the grave. So, it just depends on whether the person's willing to work on it or not, whether they get through it. But I'm approached a lot by, hey, Michael, I'm approached a lot by people who have had come to injuries not from birth, come from injuries from involvement in the military or the police or trauma or accidents. As a loneliness coach, have you been approached by individuals who've come to disability on the second half of life?
Oh yeah, yeah, and again, one of the funniest things I've ever seen is a guy who does have cerebral palsy. He's in his 30s, and the misconceptions of other people of what that actually meant, because so he uses a wheelchair, and I remember watching somebody try and help him get up out of the wheelchair, and they thought it was like a spinal cord injury. Right. And I'm like, he's not going to say anything about what's going on here. He's just going to let it happen. And I was like, whoa, stop a minute. Hey, so just so you know, he can feel everything that you're doing. He hasn't lost feeling in any of his limbs just because he can't move them the same way. Right. So that was an interesting time in life to be like, people can make the assumption that we have spinal cord injuries if we are a person who uses a wheelchair for our mobility. But to go back to your original question, I think when I've seen people who are dealing with an injury, the biggest part of the cognitive story going on for them is they're experiencing grief. Mm-hmm. They're experiencing a loss of who they used to be. Yeah. And I imagine that we go through a similar process. It looks different, and we do it earlier on, probably at points where we don't actually realize that it's going on for us. Yeah. And maybe if you're sitting there and you haven't dealt with that yet, I would invite you to look at it as maybe you're dealing with some grief, and to figure out where in that stage you are, because it's okay to be angry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know for me, I was, in the 80s, I was in school, and that was when inclusion was really, at its, beginnings, right? Mm-hmm. And so because I didn't have any cognitive impact, I was 100% mainstreamed, no time outside of the mainstream classroom. That was good and bad in a lot of ways. And one thing I can remember in elementary school, after going to school, after having had several procedures and cast and, braces and all kinds of mobility devices while recovering from surgery, if you've got your cognitive ability, there's no way that at some point you're not going to grieve not being able to do something, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's an instrument, especially if you're mainstreamed, because everybody else around you can just pick it up and do great at it or suck at it, but they have the choice to do it either way, whereas you don't, right? And so I would say for me, I remember a true time of what I would call temporary grief in elementary school, where I realized that I was going to be mainstreamed for the rest of my life, and I was going to have to learn how to cheer everybody else on while they were doing a whole bunch of stuff I couldn't do. Whether it was I was invited to a birthday party that was a skating party, right? Not an option for me, right? But still invited, still got to go, still got to be a good sport. Yay! or drugged to a PE class where everybody's got track and field day, and the only thing I can do is throw the shot put. Like, whatever it is, there's that little adjustment in yourself where you're like, okay, one, it kind of sucks that I can't do any of this. And two, now I have to learn how to cope. Now I have to learn how to deal, because I can't let this be, it can't F up my whole day. Like, I have to just let this happen and get over it, because if it messes up my whole day, it's going to be a really long life, right?
Yeah, because that day is not just a day. Yeah.
No, it's not just a day. It's weeks, it's months, it's years. And then, like, I'm in a situation where I had a very able-bodied sibling, so I had to learn to make peace about it so that I could encourage my sibling, and so that he didn't feel any guilt participating in things that I couldn't participate in, things like that, where you start to realize that it's bigger than you. Like, yeah, maybe you do have feelings, right? But those feelings and how you act is bigger than you. It can impact your whole family, and in a really crappy way, if you're not willing to, make peace with it. So did you go through any of that, or when did it happen for you? For me, it was elementary school, which for some people may be early, but since I was mainstream from day one, it was like, that's what it was. So
yeah. Let me think about this. So first, I want to say I laugh because I remember those roller skate parties. Those are all the rage back in the day. I don't think they happen anymore.
Nope.
These days.
In the 80s, they were a big deal, and everybody had them. And and then sometimes I would be a good sport and like go ahead and skate with the frame and whatever. But the reality is, I wanted to do that about as much as I wanted a root canal. Like, I was just doing it to make other people feel better. I wasn't doing it because I was enjoying it.
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. But I'll dive in to my thoughts first. So I was also mainstreamed.
Yep.
I would say I don't think that this has to do with my body image, but it definitely has to do with self-image, right?
Right.
So in first grade, also back in that time frame,
right,
they taught us a thing called cursive, and they taught us handwriting, and
yep.
So I remember coming home and having red X's all over my paper.
Yeah.
And I was doing the best that I could. And that, my mom said, when that was going on, if it would have continued as I got older and as I was more capable of realizing, a doctor said that I was suicidal, just based off of that experience of getting all those X's and the internal feeling. Like, I don't really remember this, but the internal feeling of, hey, I'm doing everything I can and everything's getting marked wrong. So what can I do?
Right. And like that, the impossible mountain that is life with CP, right? Like, you never, even if you do well, like myself or like you, where, we go to college, we have relationships, we drive, we do most of the mile markers, you're still on a ski lift, and there's certain parts of it you're never going to make it to. It's just not going to happen. And the whole, cursive writing with the red X's thing is a perfect example of, at a very young age, you learn that even your very, very best is not enough to keep up with the rest. And you have to, like, the main thing that we tackle cognitively is not the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. What we tackle cognitively as people with CP is how to cope. It's all emotional quotient, not IQ. It's all EQ, right? And those of us that come up to speed with the EQ, we do fine. But those of us who don't come up to the speed with the EQ, we've got the depression, we've got the suicide, we've got the mental health issues and the isolation and a lot of that stuff. So I think like 75% of what we do in elementary school is the emotional part. And you know, the cognitive is the easier part as far as learning our multiplication and whatever. It's the coping with everything that's the harder part, I think.
Yeah, I was reading a letter from my mom the other day, and she wrote this. I don't remember when this letter was, but it's between my first birthday and my 5th birthday, okay?
Yep.
And one of the things that she says in the letter is, like, she got all the questions of, like, this was around the time when normally you learn to walk.
Right.
And she would get the questions of, hey, you know, Nathan's just fooling you. He could walk if he wanted.
Right.
And all these like random things that are talking about the ability that I don't have.
Yeah.
And she said in the letter, me and your dad try and like let you do everything.
Right.
And we hope that we're doing right. But at the end of the day, we hope that all this stuff is able to help you cope.
Right.
So they knew very early on the importance of being able to cope. And I think that's why, like, from your perspective, like, there were only 2 times in elementary school where I kind of felt that way. One was the handwriting, and then one was in 5th grade, and it really didn't have as much to do with CP as other issues, but it was the whole idea. And this goes for the parents. If there are any parents that see this,
right,
don't pay your kids for their grades.
Right.
Because then we attach part of our worth to the grades we make.
Yeah.
And I was so high pressured and put it on myself to make straight A's in 5th grade that I used to pretend to make myself sick so I could go home, so I didn't have to deal with going to school.
Yeah.
But my stuff really started hitting in 6th grade and beyond. It was really a lot of just middle school. I'm sure some of the stuff I questioned stuff in high school, but I think that was just normal high school stuff.
Normal teenage angst that didn't necessarily have anything to do with cerebral palsy, right? Just normal coming of age stuff. Yeah.
But my dad was a football coach, and my brother, by the time he graduated high school, he's 6'2", and my dad's 6 foot tall, and so I was the kid who wanted to play football. Like, my brother ended up playing football. I don't think he wanted to.
Yeah.
I was the one that wanted to and wasn't able.
Yeah.
And that's probably the times when I struggle most. And I say when I struggle most because it still pops up.
Yeah.
Even today, are when they're athletic pursuits and wanting to do something specifically related to physical ability alone. Is when that pops up for me.
Totally. So a couple people have put things in the comments, so I'm going to read those for us, Nathan, so you can hear those too. And Michael says he had a doctor at a doctor's appointment that actually kicked his left leg because he didn't turn his leg inward, you know, when you're doing the test or whatever. So he actually had a doctor that, you know, obviously didn't know a whole heck of a lot because assumed he couldn't feel it, which we all know he could. And then Kristen M. Masella says that she is the mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old with CP, and that she prays she can do right by them in teaching them self-love and self-expression. And Kristen, that's part of the reason why Nathan and I are here, and we're doing this series specifically on body image, because we're hoping that moving forward, other Jaimes and Nathans that are younger than us will be able to see some of these and hopefully help them in their journey, or at least see that they will make it to adulthood, because it does feel like a big mountain to climb. So we're glad that you found us, and we're also very glad that you're here. So Nathan, I agree with you 100%. I came from a household that's very sports oriented, that's very athletic. I was able to do certain things, and the things I was able to do, I did to an extreme, like swim and horseback ride, right? But the things that I couldn't do, I had to learn how to enjoy them, even though I wasn't ever going to be able to do them. And that takes a little bit of what I call upper level thinking, of scaffolding, where you're like, okay, this isn't about me. This is about my appreciation of the people I care about, and my appreciation of, I can't hate able-bodied people or resent able-bodied people because they can do things that I can't. That's not healthy. That's not right. It doesn't mean I'm not occasionally going to have a bad day where I'm not going to say, I really wish I could play volleyball or, whatever. But like, I have to learn to not resent able-bodied people. And you and I both, as adults, I know we've had this discussion, know some pretty militant, pissed off, cranky, disabled people. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah, the angry disabled person syndrome. That's what I call it. And it's just the mad at the world. And look, here's the thing. Right? For all of us in here, you had no control over this.
Nope.
You had no control. It's what showed up. But the people around you had no control either. It's not their fault that this happened to you. It's just a circumstance that was placed in your life. And I think that that's one of the biggest things when it comes to our mind. We just get bombarded with the label of disability equaling bad.
Right.
And people try and replace the label all the time with, and you can agree to use this label. I'm all about people finding labels that empower them, but you get labels like handy-capable.
You're gonna see me roll my eyes because I have an opinion on this, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even like when people say only see my ability and not the dis.
Right.
My frame of reference is what makes disability a bad word.
Right.
Really, it's just your perception of what it means. But I can tell you, especially since I know that there are parents watching, I would tell you, you should use the word disability, and you should normalize using the word disability, because at the end of the day, that's going to help your kid be more successful in the world. Because look, there are programs set aside for people who have disabilities to support them in living a more independent life. But if your kid does not identify with having a disability, or doesn't want to because of it's seen as negative, that's going to impact their ability to even know that those programs exist.
Or even be receptive to participating in them later in life. And you're not going to live forever, so your child has to be comfortable advocating for themselves and finding their own community. And the reality is, we are the disabled community. You don't see the deaf community finding another word for deaf. you don't see the blind community finding another word for blind. It is what it is. We are disabled. So I personally, that's one of the few things that I will share my opinion on. I personally get very upset when anyone uses anything but the term disabled, because it's not setting people up for success if you use candy coated whatever. It's, you know, it's not the reality. And if you're going to be successful, you have to live in reality, not the candy coated, oh, you're capably able, whatever. Yeah, to an extent. But part of why my group is called Cerebral Palsy Sunrise is because every day when I wake up, I still have cerebral palsy. No matter what I achieved the day before, or no matter what I achieved that day, I still wake up every morning and it's the same Groundhog Day that it was 40 years ago, right?
Yeah, I like that. It is the same Groundhog Day, just different weather. That's interesting. Like, I don't know what it will take to get there. I don't even know if that will happen within either of our lifetimes, but I just think the more you challenge what the label actually means, and the more you let go of it being good or being bad, the more you're set up to succeed in life, because you're able to realize that, look, even if you use any of those other labels, like it's still a part of you.
Right.
You have cerebral palsy, you have whatever your disability is. I know in here specifically it's cerebral palsy.
Right.
But that's probably one of the biggest hurdles when it comes to self-image, right, for people. And I think a lot of that has to do with the medical model. Mm-hmm. Like, we're only seen a lot of times from the medical model, and like disorders, diseases, right, disabilities are all seen as bad. Like, they're right, seen as you're not optimally, you're not optimizing your body. Right. And I would challenge that to say, could be that you're optimizing it to the best of its ability. Like, yeah, our 100% is different from everybody else's 100%. And if you want a better self-image, I would say start to figure out how to optimize your 100%. I would say things that probably impact the way that we look at ourselves, that we don't put a lot of stock in, are the things that we eat. We talked about this before, but yeah, what we do with our physical body, working out. Yep. Here's something really, really simple that I bet a lot of people aren't doing. Like, if you've got somebody and you sit inside all day, you should wake up and go in the sunlight. Yes. In the morning, because that's going to tremendously support your health and well-being. Exactly. Yeah, no, big time. I agree with that 100%. And, take breaks throughout the day, and mm-hmm. get that burst, and, learn how to breathe, because stuff's going to happen that you can't control. So, learn how to breathe and reboot yourself, and, deep breathing techniques and meditation. There's a lot to be said for learning how to put yourself outside of your body, because you can't change it. So, I would say for people who have young children, one of the best things you can do is teach them how to breathe. Teach them mm-hmm. how to breathe and collect themselves, and then go back into something. Now, does that sound mature for
a little person? Yeah, sure it does. But the reality is your little person, in order to be successful, is going to have to be a lot more mature than their peers. They're going to have to learn how to intake information. They're going to have to learn how to intake insults and criticism
and you can't do anything about that. Just so you know, you have no control over that happening. It happens.
Yeah. And it's not just children. It's adults. It's, you know, it's not just the, you know, the kids in the classroom. So, you know, I think that's probably, whether it's, you know, getting sunshine, learning how to breathe, like knowing how to reboot yourself, because you are, or, you know, just the embarrassment of wiping out in public. Like, how do you reboot yourself after you've landed on your ass and everyone is appalled, right? Like, what's the reboot for that? Well, you know, that it takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't take a whole hell of a lot of time. Most of us, by the time we're, you know, 10 or 11, know how to handle it, right? But you might not know how to handle it when, you know, you're 6 or 7. And it takes that repetition, unfortunately, of having it happen and knowing how to handle it. But it does impact your self-image and your body image for sure. In the comments, Rachel said that we had her crying, but in a good way. So sorry we got you crying, Rachel, but we're glad they're good tears. And it's okay to feel emotions, because, you know, body image and disability is a super emotional thing. I can't think of anything quite more emotional maybe than other than guilt, maybe, that we could talk about, right? So it makes sense that it might bring out some emotion in you. Michael says that even though he has a disability, in his mind, he feels like a normal person. And I would say that that's probably the case for 98% of our members, because we're all at a certain cognitive level. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found the group, right? So I think almost all of us feel like a normal person. And we are normal. There's nothing... There's nothing not normal about being disabled. There's just a certain part of us that's different, right? And Michael also said that he loves trying new things. So, like, I know for me, you know, I'm approached by a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, you know, you just have such good coping skills." Well, yeah, I do, but it's not like I had a choice.
Because I've been through a bunch of shit.
Yeah. So it's like it's not like I really had a choice. I was either going to sink or swim, right? So I learned how to swim. I learned how to cope. Now, there's a downside to that. The downside to it is I am not as empathetic as I probably should be, right? I am hyper focused when it comes to the things that I can do, because I feel like I have to do them to the nth degree in order to be, you know, accepted and seen and paid and you name it, right? Like, I don't feel like I can ever do anything half-assed. If I take it on, I have to really do it well. Otherwise, people are going to blame it on my disability, whether it's my disability's fault or not, right? So, you know, there's all kinds of, what do you want to say, like layers to the onion that happen. Oh, Michael said, Catherine corrected me. Thank you, Michael. She said that in his mind, he does not feel like a normal person. So I guess there's two sides to the coin then there, Nathan. Some people do feel normal and don't think about it until they see themselves, and other people don't feel normal. So I guess it just depends.
My question to everybody, and your answer is going to be your answer, okay, but I think it's going to support you either way, is what is normal?
Right.
And how often do we talk about wanting to be normal, but all the people you look up to, they're not normal.
Right.
Like, if you like basketball and you saw the finals just ended, LeBron James isn't a normal dude.
Right.
He's doing a bunch of shit that nobody else is willing to do.
Right.
And so we strive to be and reach this place of normalcy, but all the people that we look up to and that we want to be. Like, if you want to be somebody like Elon Musk, he's doing a bunch of stuff that a lot of people aren't willing to do.
Right.
And most people end up calling those people crazy at some point in their life. So I just would question, what's your definition of normal? And then knowing what that is, you get.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, definitely. I know for me, like I always used to say, you know, what's wrong with me is right out front. I don't get to hide it. What's wrong with you, I have to figure out, right? So that's kind of my I guess you'd say view on the able-bodied world is, you know, what's wrong with me is right out front. I don't get to hide it. I don't get to pretend about it. What's wrong with an able-bodied person? They may get to hide that crap. That's part of what makes relationships hard, right? Is, you know, they can have a whole lot of stuff going on upstairs that, you know, you may or may not know about, because it's not, you know, easily seen until you get to know them. So, but I think everybody has somewhere where they struggle. It's just very obvious for us that the place that we struggle most has to do with body mechanics and motor skills and, you know, all that crap that is brain damage. So that's just, you know, the easy thing to say. And as a result of that, some of us do struggle with other stuff. But an able-bodied person, they don't have to worry about any of that motor control stuff. So anything that's different for them is going to be stuff that you can't see until you get to know them, and until you see how they handle life. Now, I personally, and this is just my 2-cent opinion, but I personally think that every individual with CP at some point in their life should attend counseling, whether it's younger, adolescent, or adult, or even temporarily for short amounts of time, even throughout life, because we get some major curveballs of things that change as we age. I personally am a big supporter of having someone to talk to about that is not a caregiver or a family member, because the stuff that you're going to be dealing with, it's not to say that you can't talk to your siblings or your parents or your friends.
They don't know.
But they don't know, and there's some of that they shouldn't know. That should be allowed to be your private feelings, so that you don't have guilt, or so that they don't have guilt, and so that you can work through those. Because there's certain feelings that you're going to have surrounding life moments that your family members are going to have that you're not, that talking to somebody that's a third party is a really good idea. If you want to, like, you know, be healthy. And that's just my, you know, that's just my 2 cents. But, you know, part of how I've been able to handle things to a certain degree is if I feel, you know, too much pressure on the teapot, I'm not afraid to go talk to somebody. I posted yesterday a big link and ad for betterhealth.com. It's an online counseling service with licensed therapists. You can text them, you can video them, you can phone call them, you can go for 2 weeks, you can go for 6 months. The gentleman in the ad has been going for 6 years, and he's not disabled, okay? So it's not to say that you need counseling every single day. You don't, in most cases. But there are times in life where you're going to need some help, and I just don't think a family member or a caregiver is the appropriate person to speak to about those feelings. What do you think, Nathan?
Well, I've definitely been to counseling, and there are probably times when I should have gone to counseling, and it was just never broached as a thing to do. And at that time, I wasn't like I could say, oh yeah, I want to go do this for myself
at that point. Yeah.
So I recommend that as a coach. I definitely know that what most people want is somebody to listen. Like, I'd say for me professionally, I'm like in collaboration with therapy. I'm not a licensed therapist. And people still probably talk to me about stuff that they would also talk to a therapist about. And so people are looking for that space to be heard. And I like for therapy is the funding, right? Find somebody who either accepts your insurance or is affordable. And I would say, I don't know all the resources out there, but I know that there are programs to support people regardless of where you are financially with receiving services. And I know that not from the disabled side of things. I know that from friends who have utilized services who don't have disabilities as well. So remember that you are also, you might think that you have special circumstances when it comes to this, but this is a human being need.
It is. And it may be complicated by some of the COVID stuff that we're going through right now, right? Because everybody's new normal is totally different. We don't have the family access, the activity access, the transportation access, like everything about
and we already didn't have a lot of those things to begin with within the community itself. So.
Right. And now we're like pared down even more. You know, there's no better time than the present to get some help and to make that a priority. There's, you know, free resources, there's paid resources. If you're stuck, let me or Nathan or Jody or DJ or somebody in the group know, and you know, we'll help you find resources if you tell us, you know, your situation. That's part of why we want to have a community, is so that when people do get stuck, they can say, you know, well, I've been thinking about this, you know, what has somebody tried? You know, we can put you in touch with resources if that's something, you know, you're considering. And if it's not something that you've ever done, seriously consider it. Everybody's got something that they need to work through. Obviously, the more verbal you are, the easier it can be sometimes. But even if you're nonverbal, you can still do therapy with using your keyboard and your communication device. So don't think that just because you have a speech complication that you can't do therapy. You can. So the only person who can't do therapy is the person who refuses to, but that's it. So just, you know, get yourself some help so that you can feel better. And when you feel better, honestly, the body image kind of falls into place. Now, you know, we don't all wake up feeling like The Rock or, you know, Cindy Crawford, right? But we can at least feel good about what it is that, you know, that we do have. You know, we're not all Dwayne Johnson, so, you know, we can't, you know, just say, okay, you know, that's, we feel like we're invincible. But we can make ourselves, you know, certainly feel better and normal. And again, that's not a disabled person specialty thing. Regular able-bodied people feel the same way. And that's why there's billion-dollar industries surrounding self-help and image and, you know, all that good stuff, is because you don't have to have a disability to struggle with these things. And that's the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Nathan, is sometimes I feel like we treat ourselves too special, that we kind of, you know, give ourselves this get out of jail free card of, oh, well, you know, we don't have to deal with that or cope with that or whatever because of our disability. And we give ourselves an out because we're like, oh, we're special, we're different. And, you know, you really shouldn't do that. You shouldn't give yourself an out because of your disability. You just shouldn't. Well, I mean, that's my opinion, but, you know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you rob yourself and you rob the world when you do that. Because you never know what that hard thing that you're avoiding could create for you. And it could mean that you impact so many other people just because you did a hard thing.
Right.
When I think about that, what comes to mind for me is my journey in the gym. Like, and you talked about falling on your ass. Like, I remember going in. Oh, this is so interesting because it made me think of another point too. But I remember going in, and the first time I went, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. This is what I've been missing."
Right.
In my body. But as I kept going, what I realized was this isn't even about me at some point. Like, I was doing it, but I had a bigger vision in my mind for the reason why I was doing it. Like, when I walked in there, I knew that it changed people's perception of what was possible. And I actually got a kid who ended up working with me because his buddy saw my videos from the gym online, and the kid has cerebral palsy, and he was like, so why can't you do this? And it just worked out. I ended up working with that kid for a month, and the whole conversation, it went like this. It went like,
was it a male kid?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. At first, his parents were like, "Who is this guy? Is he taking advantage of you?" And guys, at that point, he didn't pay me anything. I was just like, "Hey, man, I see a lot of stuff that's capable. I think we can do a lot in a month if you're willing to like go on this journey with me." And so his mom was like, "Is this a scam?" And then within 1 week of training, he had already doubled what he was able to do.
Right.
And I did nothing, people. All I did was model a behavior.
Right.
I modeled a behavior. He decided in that moment, well, hey, if he can do it, then I can do it. And I can try and do it and see what happens. Right. And he told me, because I know there's people that talk about working out on here. One of the best exercises I think anybody with cerebral palsy can do is called farmer walks, because it works on your grip, it works on your balance. It can build a lot of strength for us. And his dad told him he wasn't going to be able to do it. By the time the month was over, he said, "Yeah, so I just did this," and my dad started crying because he never thought that it was possible. I was like, there's a lot possible that people can't, like your dad, your mom, they can't see that because, like we said, they don't know what internally is going on within you. And if you give yourself that out, and there's somebody right now that's probably on the edge of giving themselves that out right now, but deep down you're capable of much more. But you're just allowing that outside story of, oh, it's okay, they can't do that. You're allowing that to become your story. And there's so much more that you're capable of. In those letters, one of the things my mom wrote was, you try everything, even if you fail, you try everything and you do it anyway. Even when you fail, you do it anyway. And that's from when I was 3 to 5 years old. And that's kind of never left me. That's not something somebody taught me. It's just something that I internally realized. And talking about falling, one of my favorite quotes that I said was like, you crash and you burn, right? But at the end of the day, you get up and you go on. And there was a point when we were on the playground and one of my friends tripped and fell over and like hurt themselves. And again, non-disabled friend.
Right.
And then I looked at my mom and I was like, it's okay. They just haven't learned how to fall yet.
Right, exactly. They just don't know how to fall. So Rachel wanted you to repeat what kind of walk that exercise was, Nathan.
Yeah, it's called a farmer's walk.
FARMER.
Yeah, and it's basic. You use it as a weight, right? I'm trying to get. So imagine these are weights. You drop your hands to your side, and you try and walk as straight as possible in an upright posture. You could use something as simple as milk jugs. Even if you only have one, you can do it one arm at a time.
Yep. Or if you have one side that's stronger than the other, you can start with that side first, and then once you get more comfortable.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? I would tell you to do the opposite. I would tell you to start with
the weak side. Yeah.
So that you build that up so it balances out. But the point is get started no matter what you do. And you can use just about anything. And it is just testing the limits of what you can do. And just make sure that if it's kind of heavy, no matter what it is, I would say in that point, if it gets too heavy, don't use the milk jug, because if you drop it, you're just going to have to go buy more milk.
Right.
But
maybe drink the milk first and save it. Yeah. So I will say I recommend for every person with CP, no matter their level of affliction, to find a physical activity that they can do, because the benefits of doing that activity mentally, and also physically, but even more so mentally, means so much in clearing your head and building the endorphins and helping you get a good self-image. So if it's that you can plank, sit-ups, do sit-ups. If you don't have use of your legs, but you got use of your arms, free weights, whatever physical activity you can do it, and do it almost every day, so that you can have the mental reboot of all those good endorphins, and also just the accomplishment of, well, I didn't get everything done that I wanted to do today, but I did get this. I think that's what a lot of people are missing. And I also think it's why a lot of people fall back, right? They do something for a while, they get some benefits, and then the reality is they kind of get lazy, right? And we don't have the luxury as disabled adults to get lazy. We have to continue to do it, because if we don't, we'll lose ground. So whatever it is that you can do, find it, do it, and dedicate 30 minutes of your day to it, no matter what, because you will feel better. You just will. There's just no way around it.
And there's actually science proving that, let's say there's something that you can't physically do. If you know how to do it and you can't physically do it, there's science behind the power of actually visualizing the activity. So let's say one is doing bicep curls. You can build just as much tension. I would say before anything, try and see if you can physically do it with something, right? But if you can't, there's science that shows you can make your mind work your muscle without having to physically do something. As long as you know what it looks like and what it's supposed to look like, you can trick your body into activating that stuff. I mean, there's so much that's possible that we don't currently know, and as science progresses, it's going to be amazing to kind of see what's possible and how we can access our brain to work through some of the stuff that we deal with, because chances are there's stuff that we can do that we don't know right now that when we're all old and gray, that we'll be like, oh man, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Right?
Wish
I would have known that sooner, kind of thing. I think the one thing for sure that you and I were able to prove today, Nathan, is that body image and life with CP in general is super cognitive. It's probably more cognitive than it is physical, right? Because the physical you don't have as much control over, but the cognitive you do. And so whether it's that you're able to work through things on your own cognitively and make peace with it, or whether that it's you do as Nathan and I have recommended, and I'm going to be so brave as to say both done, because you and I have both discussed at different points in our life, we've both received counseling. Both of us strongly encourage you to not be afraid to reach out and to find the right counseling scenario for yourself, because I would go so far to say 75% of dealing well with a disability is the cognitive, and 25% is treating the symptoms, right? So if you're doing great on your own, that's wonderful. But if you've still got some speed bumps, definitely find somebody and get some help, because life is short and you want to enjoy it as much as you can. And the more help you get, the better you'll feel. That's just the reality. So,
and I would say that's worth. I know lots of times we have fewer financial resources, but I would say that's one of the things that's worth investing money in, because the better you feel about you, the more you're going to be able to go out and see possibilities to make more money.
Exactly. And I just want to thank all of you who joined us today. Nathan, I want to thank you for your time, because it's certainly a lot more fun to discuss these things with another person than it is to be a talking head in space. So thanks for giving us time on your Friday. Everybody, we'll be doing part 4 in the body image series next week. So join Nathan and I again next week. And thanks so much for being here, everybody. We'll see you again online real soon. Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.